There is a quiet mystery to the way heaven arranges meetings, not with fireworks or fanfare, but in the hush of what seems ordinary. The great irony of divine providence is that the holiest meetings often feel the least remarkable until you look back and wonder how eternity slipped into your timeline unnoticed. The first way God introduces you to your soulmate is through divine convergence disguised as chance. Not every meeting is marked by music or magnetism. Sometimes you meet them in the most unassuming hour, in the most unimpressive way. A shared table, a group gathering, a passing word in a place you nearly didn't go. It does not feel epic yet. In hindsight, it is. Because the soul often recognizes what the mind cannot grasp. The moment feels safe. The conversation is strangely familiar. It is as if your spirit leans forward and says, "Ah, there you are." God hides his fingerprints in the folds of the everyday. The second way is through a mirror of longing. Long before you meet the one you're meant for, your soul is shaped by longing. Not just for affection, but for purpose, holiness, truth. When another soul burns with the same fire, you are drawn not by appearance, not by charm, but by resonance. Their dreams, their suffering, their compass point to the same true north. You don't need to speak it aloud. You feel it in their choices, in their silence, in the way they stand for something eternal. You do not know them, but you understand them. You do not plan it, but you start walking in rhythm. Two lives answering the same call tend to find each other when neither is looking behind or beside, but upward. The third way is in divine interruption. You planned one thing, God allowed another. You took a path for one reason and met someone for a higher one. We think detours are delays, but often they are divine redirects. The person who seems to arrive during your unraveling might just be the thread that holds your next chapter together. When God sends someone into your storm who doesn't fix it but stands in it, pay attention. That is not merely kindness, that is covenant forming in the fire. When your walls are down and someone sees the ruins and stays, that is the blueprint of soul-level union. It is a holy mercy that you rarely know when it's happening. If you did, you'd rush it, distort it, or protect yourself from it. But God does not introduce souls to each other for mere romance. He does so for restoration, for refinement, and for the mission of making each other more like Him. A soulmate is not just someone you love. It is someone who reminds you of heaven and walks with you toward it. So look carefully at what feels ordinary. Pay attention to what draws your soul and not just your eyes. And when your plans fall apart, lean in. For it may not be the end of your direction, it may be the beginning of your divine connection. God has a way of disguising eternity in the garments of everyday life. He wraps the profound in the simple, veils destiny in the mundane, and allows eternal bonds to begin with a passing glance or a casual conversation. Divine convergence, when it truly happens, almost never enters with trumpets or shining lights. It slips in quietly, clothed in the fabric of normalcy, so unassuming that we might overlook it entirely. We often expect the great turning points of our lives to be marked by dramatic signals, some unmistakable sign that heaven has intervened, but more often it comes softly, disguised as coincidence. You may find yourself walking into a room you hadn't planned to enter, invited to an event you nearly declined, sitting beside someone you didn't expect to meet. Perhaps it is a bookstore aisle or a coffee shop line or a mutual friend's quiet gathering. There is no lightning bolt, no sudden cinematic music swelling in the background, and yet something stirs. Not in your chest where excitement often lives, but deeper in the quiet, knowing place of the soul. A presence feels oddly familiar. A conversation unfolds effortlessly, even if it's brief. And later, when you're alone, you feel as though something shifted, but you can't name what. This is the subtlety of divine orchestration. God does not impose His will with force. He whispers it into motion. His sovereignty unfolds in layers with a patience that does not demand your awareness, only your openness. You might not even notice the meeting at first. You may not speak beyond a greeting. Sometimes your eyes simply meet. Sometimes your words only brush the surface. But something sacred passes between you that logic cannot pin down. It is only later in memory or reflection that you begin to realize that moment was not random. That encounter carried weight beyond its surface. This is what makes divine convergence so paradoxical. It feels so ordinary at the time that you are tempted to forget it entirely. But God, in His brilliance, hides the eternal inside the temporal precisely so we won't manipulate it. If we knew the significance of some meetings ahead of time, we would try to control them, rush them, shape them into what we think they should be. But when we do not realize their meaning, we approach them with honesty, vulnerability, and most importantly, unfiltered authenticity. We don't perform. We don't pose. We show up as we are. And in that unguarded state, something sacred takes root. In the realm of human souls, what is holy rarely begins with intensity, it begins with recognition. Not the recognition of the mind, which catalogs features or facts, but of the spirit, which remembers things deeper than memory. It is not uncommon to hear someone say of a soulmate, it felt like I'd known them forever, even if they had just met. That statement, while often romanticized, carries a kernel of spiritual truth. In divine convergence, the soul identifies something that transcends the timeline. There is a comfort that should not logically be present. There is a resonance that feels out of place in a first meeting, but it is there, undeniably, quietly persistent. What makes this process even more profound is that both people often feel the same sense of peace, even if they don't articulate it. There is no pressure, no urgency, no need to impress. The presence of the other feels like a place you can rest in rather than a person you need to pursue. That's because divine convergence does not begin in striving, it begins in stillness. You don't chase it, you notice it, you rest in it, you honor it without needing to immediately define it. Sometimes months, even years, will pass before you understand what truly happened in that moment. Life may pull you in separate directions. You may meet again later under different circumstances and suddenly everything clicks into place. Or you may walk closely from the start, slowly discovering how layered and meaningful that first meeting really was. In either case, the initial convergence remains foundational, not because of how dramatic it was, but because of how gently it began. And this is the mark of God's handiwork. It often enters unnoticed, but once it is recognized, it reveals layers of beauty and intention that could never have been manufactured. What appeared to be casual was in fact calculated. What seemed spontaneous was sovereign. What felt simple was sacred all along. There is something deeper than attraction, more enduring than compatibility, more sacred than surface harmony. It is the echo of shared longings between two souls. These longings are not simply desires for love or companionship. They are soul-deep hungerings for what is eternal, beautiful, and pure. Before two people even meet, God often stirs their hearts with similar longings. These are not planted by culture, preference, or past experience. They are embedded by design, like divine fingerprints left on the fabric of who they are becoming. Longings are how the soul speaks in the silence of daily life, a yearning for something more than this world can offer, a hunger for meaning that cannot be quenched by success, applause, or comfort, a thirst for God, truth, righteousness, and purpose. These longings are not random. They are holy indicators, signs that the soul remembers its origin and aches to return, even if it cannot articulate what is missing. When one soul begins to form around these longings, it unknowingly sets itself on a path that will one day intersect with another. This is not fate in the romantic sense, but divine alignment. Because when God is forming a union, He does not begin with the external. He begins in the secret places, in convictions, in dreams, in values, in suffering. One soul may be drawn to justice, another to mercy. One aches for worship, another for wonder. But when two people share the same ache, even if expressed differently, their hearts begin to beat with the same rhythm. You may not even recognize the moment at first. Perhaps it's a conversation that unexpectedly touches something sacred. You speak of your dreams, your fears, your questions about God, and instead of feeling misunderstood, you feel mirrored, not copied, mirrored. Their longing does not diminish yours, it deepens it. It affirms what you thought you were alone in. It confirms that you are not the only one who carries a hunger for something beyond this world. This is the language of soul echoes. It is not loud, but it is unmistakable. It's not about saying the same words, it's about hearing the same truth underneath different stories. You may have lived different lives, grown up in different ways, even followed different timelines, but something in your spirit bends toward the same horizon. You value what cannot be bought. You desire love that sanctifies, not just satisfies. You seek purpose that stretches beyond comfort. And when you find someone else doing the same, your soul begins to speak in recognition. This is why surface attraction, while often loud and immediate, fades without these deeper longings beneath it. When two people are drawn together only by appearance or convenience or the thrill of novelty, the bond cannot hold under pressure. But when the connection is rooted in shared longing, it becomes a sacred tether, something that withstands seasons, storms, and silence. Because it was never about having everything in common, but about being drawn toward the same eternal flame. Sometimes these echoes come alive in worship when your hearts are both moved by the same unseen glory. Sometimes it happens in grief when you both feel the ache of this broken world and long for its redemption. Sometimes it happens in service when you find yourself sacrificing for the same cause, pouring yourselves out for the same truth. These are not just shared experiences, they are shared altars, moments where your souls kneel beside one another, not because of each other, but is of the most beautiful relationships are not the ones that make life easier, but the ones that make you more aware of eternity. When someone's presence reminds you of what you were made for, when their words awaken your spiritual hunger instead of quieting it, when their love invites you higher instead of pulling you into comfort alone, that is not ordinary affection. That is a soul echo. That is the resonance of longing answering longing. And even if you do not yet name it love, you cannot deny the recognition. For the soul knows its echoes. It remembers the sound of home, even when it has never been there. It hears in another's longing the rhythm of its own. And it leans closer, not in need, but in awe. Not to consume, but to witness. Because what you share is not possession, it is pursuit. A mutual reaching towards something greater, truer, more permanent than either of you alone. There is a sacred irony in the way God rewrites our plans. The very moments we label as inconvenient, disappointing, or disruptive are often the precise moments He has appointed for a deeper unveiling of His will. We tend to believe that divine order means predictability, that the hand of God will only move through the lanes we've paved, the schedules we've curated, and the dreams we've delicately arranged. But heaven is rarely so tame. Interruptions are not the absence of God's plan, they are often the entrance into it. To the human mind, interruption feels like a setback, a sudden delay, a cancelled trip, a missed opportunity, a conversation that changes everything. We are tempted to resist it, to restore our sense of control, to rewrite the moment as quickly as possible so we can return to the narrative we expected. But God, who sees the whole of the story, often steps in not to delay us, but to deliver us into something deeper, truer, and more eternal than our limited vision could have imagined. Sometimes these divine interruptions come in the form of people. A stranger who initiates a conversation, a friend who unexpectedly reappears, a new connection forged during a detour. At first glance, it may seem like a random encounter, a delay that just happens to include another soul. But beneath the surface, something is stirring. The interruption was not merely circumstantial, it was divinely timed. Not for your inconvenience, but for your transformation. When we are interrupted, our defenses are often lowered. We are no longer performing, no longer walking the well-rehearsed script of our daily routines. We are exposed in some way, vulnerable, perhaps confused, caught between what was and what now is. And it is there, in that vulnerable space, that we are often most able to see what we've missed, that God has been trying to reach us not through the familiar, but through the unexpected. He breaks our rhythm not to unsettle us, but to recenter us. The same is true in the way we encounter significant people, especially those who carry the fragrance of destiny. You may meet someone not in the glow of success or the momentum of a clear season, but in a hallway of transition, in the midst of grief, or in the slow unraveling of a plan you had trusted. They arrive not when you feel ready, but when you feel lost. And yet, their presence feels like an answer you didn't know you were waiting for. This is the mysterious generosity of divine interruption. It not only reveals the right people, but also the true state of your heart. It shows you what matters. It reveals what you cling to, what you fear, what you have built your identity upon. It allows another soul to see you not in performance, but in process. And if that soul remains, if they do not shrink from your unraveling, but walk with you through it, then something sacred begins to take root. Love that forms in seasons of certainty may be beautiful, but love that forms in interruption is forged in fire. It witnesses your disorientation and still chooses to draw near. It sees the unfinished work and says, I will walk with you while it becomes. This kind of union does not begin with perfect alignment or clarity. It begins with presence in the unknown. And because it starts there, it carries a strength that superficial compatibility never could. Interruptions also reveal alignment in ways we often miss. You may be rerouted toward a path of healing and find someone who is walking a similar one. You may be slowed down by grief only to discover a soul who carries the same ache. You may step away from a broken dream and see, in the quiet of that morning, someone whose vision mirrors yours in its sacred simplicity. These are not detours, they are convergences disguised as inconvenience. God often meets us at the end of ourselves. And more often than not, He sends someone else to meet us there too. The ones who enter your life not through doors you opened, but through ones you didn't even know existed. The ones who do not fit into your previous plans, but somehow make perfect sense in your present moment. They come during a pause, a rupture, a bend in the road, and they stay, not because it's easy, but because it's right. In this way, interruption becomes invitation, not just to a person, but to a new way of being. A way that is not built on control or certainty, but trust. A way that makes room for grace, for surprise, for beauty that does not follow our timelines. When your life is interrupted, don't be too quick to fix it. Look closely, for what feels like delay may in fact be arrival, an unseen answer stepping into the open. There are moments in life when you encounter someone and without explanation, something within you softens, not because you've shared years together, not because you've walked through common memories or weathered joint trials, but because something deeper than time recognizes them. You do not know their story, and they do not know yours. Yet there is a comfort present, a stillness in their presence that feels like home, though no map leads there and no history explains it. This is familiarity without history, a phenomenon the world struggles to quantify, but the soul knows intimately. Most relationships grow from the outside in. You gather data, share details, build a bridge from past to present. But some relationships defy that natural order. They begin not with explanation, but with recognition. A feeling, not a fact. An inner knowing that whispers, this person matters. It isn't logical. It isn't the result of shared years or mutual circles. It's as if a door in your heart swings open for someone who never knocked. And they don't enter with caution, they step in as if they've always belonged. This kind of connection is not about projection or wishful thinking. It's not about romantic fantasy or spiritual overreach. It's about resonance. Something in their way of being mirrors your internal world. The way they speak, the rhythm of their silence, the questions they ask, even the way they observe life, all of it feels strangely aligned with who you are beneath the surface. You don't feel the need to explain yourself. You don't find yourself performing or protecting. You simply are. And they simply are. And somehow it fits. It is in these rare, sacred encounters that we begin to suspect that the soul operates on dimensions we cannot see. That perhaps we knew one another in a deeper way long before our paths ever crossed on earth. Not in the sense of reincarnation or fate, but in the sense of divine orchestration. That long before you met in time, your lives were already being written with a shared cadence. Your desires were being shaped by the same truth. Your wounds, though unique, were preparing you to understand and care for each other. Your purpose, though carried separately, was being bent toward the same light. When you experience familiarity without history, you often notice an immediate sense of peace, not excitement. It is not an adrenaline rush. It's not about butterflies or nervous anticipation. It is about rest, a deep exhale, as if your soul has been walking a long road and has just now found a resting place. This peace cannot be faked. It is not born of charm or chemistry. It is born of something sacred. And while the world may question it, and your mind may analyze it, your spirit knows. It may confuse you at first. How can you feel so deeply connected to someone you barely know? How can they feel like a friend when you've only exchanged a few words? How can your heart feel known when your histories have not even been shared? But this is the mystery of soul recognition. It is not about the time you've spent together, it's about the truth you carry in common. It's about the way their presence doesn't just meet your needs, but meets your knowing. As if you both walked separate paths through a wilderness only to find that your maps always led to the same clearing. And when this happens, time seems to bend. You may learn more about each other in a few conversations than others learn in years. Walls fall quickly, not because you're reckless, but because trust isn't being built from scratch, it's being awakened. What others must strive to earn over long seasons seems to be gifted in an instant. It is not naive, but natural, not hurried, but holy. For this familiarity is not shallow, it is spiritual. Familiarity without history reminds us that God is not bound by our timelines or limited by our expectations. He does not always build relationships from the ground up. Sometimes he reveals them fully formed, already bearing fruit, already echoing eternity. When someone arrives and it feels like they've always been part of your story, it may be because they were just not in ways you could previously name. Such people are rare. They do not come often, and they do not come loudly. But when they appear, they bring with them the weight of something divine. They don't demand space, they fit into it. They don't challenge your identity, they confirm it. And even if you can't explain why, you find yourself saying things like, I feel like I've known you forever, or I don't understand it, but I trust you. These are not mere sentiments, they are soul signals. They are evidence that history is not the only author of connection. Sometimes heaven writes familiarity before earth writes the story. There is a sacred order to divine love, and though our impatient hearts may plead for connection, heaven always insists on preparation first. Before union comes growth, not as a punishment or delay, but as protection, refinement, and gift. True union is not about two incomplete people stumbling into each other to find wholeness. It is about two souls who have first learned to abide in wholeness, who meet not in desperation, but in strength. Growth before union is God's way of teaching us not just how to love another, but how to carry the weight of love without breaking beneath it. The soul that has not grown will always look for a relationship to fulfill needs it was never designed to satisfy. It will search for validation, identity, purpose, and healing in another person's affection, setting the stage not for partnership but for dependency. But God, in his wisdom, often withholds what we want so that he can build in us what we need. He allows time, space, and stretching. He invites solitude, wrestles with us in silence, and walks us through deserts not to withhold love, but to prepare us to receive it without worshiping it. Growth before union is the season where God teaches us the language of our own soul. He confronts our shadows, unmasks our illusions, and anchors us in truth. It is the time when we learn that love is not about possession but stewardship, not about completion but calling. We discover that we are not waiting on someone else to start our lives. We are already living it, already becoming, already walking the road of purpose. And from that place of motion, we will one day encounter someone not who saves us from loneliness, but who joins us on the journey. This season of growth is not always glamorous. It often comes through brokenness, through pruning, through disappointment. We learn to face our fears, to forgive what hurt us, to challenge the lies we believed about ourselves. We begin to hear God more clearly, not because we are trying harder, but because the noise has been stripped away. We start to understand what matters, not what looks good in a moment, but what lasts through a lifetime. We become less enamored with romance and more rooted in reverence. And this growth does something quiet but miraculous. It changes our vision. We begin to see differently. We no longer choose people based on what they offer us in the moment, but on how their presence aligns with our calling. We begin to discern, not just feel. We look for fruit, not fantasy. We are drawn not just to shared interests, but to shared values, shared longings, shared convictions. We recognize that love is not only a feeling, it is a direction. And it requires someone who is walking toward the same eternal light. When two people meet in this space after seasons of growth, refinement, and surrender, their union does not become a burden. It becomes a confirmation. They are not shocked by the presence of one another, they are ready for it. Their union is not built on emotional highs or fleeting chemistry. It is built on spiritual recognition and mutual strength. They do not come to each other with empty hands, hoping to be filled. They come bearing gifts, identity, purpose, wisdom, and peace that they cultivated in the secret place. Growth before union also teaches us patience. It reminds us that God is not slow, He is intentional. He is not withholding love from us, He is growing love within us. He is shaping us into someone who can love with depth, lead with humility, serve without pride, and stay when things get hard. The waiting, the refining, it is all part of the preparation for something that will not collapse under pressure. Because what He builds in us before union becomes the foundation of what will endure within it. And in this growth, we also learn the joy of becoming. We stop counting the days and start cherishing the lessons. We see how every delay is actually an invitation to be healed, to be filled, to be transformed. We start to trust that when love does arrive, it will not interrupt our becoming, but enhance it. It will not distract us from God, it will reflect Him. This is why growth must precede union. Because true love is not just about who you find, it's about who you become. The person you become while waiting, while healing, while building is the person who will one day carry and sustain the kind of love that mirrors heaven. And that kind of love cannot be rushed. It must be revealed in time, through fire, through quiet, through trust. It is not the end of your becoming, it is the reward of it. There are many ways we come to know another soul: through shared words, through long hours, through laughter and trial, but one of the most revealing spaces is not found in conversation or comfort. It is found in service, for it is in service that the heart is stripped of pretense, exposed not by what it says, but by what it gives. It is here in the unseen, often thankless work of meeting needs and lifting burdens that we come to see the true character of a person, not who they are in the spotlight, but who they are when no one is looking. Service is the great revealer because it is self-forgetful. In a world obsessed with presentation, image, and polished profile, service does not allow you to curate. It demands authenticity. The soul cannot perform under the weight of consistent, sacrificial love. It either yields in humility or recoils in pride. And when two people serve side by side, whether in ministry, family, hardship, or some quiet task, they begin to see one another without disguise. They see not just gestures, but motivations, not just words, but witness. This is why hearts are unveiled in service, because service is not glamorous. It strips away the layers we wear to impress and exposes the deeper parts of us. The way someone responds to inconvenience, to interruption, to tasks that offer no applause, this is the truest window into their spirit. And often, when two people serve together, they encounter one another's hearts not as ideals, but as they really are. They witness the small choices, the quiet sacrifices, the strength hidden beneath fatigue. And slowly, something sacred begins to form, not just appreciation, but revelation. True connection is born not in shared pleasure, but in shared purpose. When we labor for the same cause, especially one that is rooted in love for others and obedience to God, we naturally lower our guards. There's no time to perform when your hands are dirty, when your strength is spent, when your compassion is being stretched. You begin to see what matters in the other person, not their charisma, not their image, but their posture toward the world. Do they serve with joy? Do they bend low without complaint? Do they hold others' burdens with grace? When we serve, our inner posture is revealed, and so is theirs, and in this holy revealing, love finds honest soil. It is easy to be enamored with charm, with intelligence, with physical beauty. But when you see someone serve with faithfulness, when you watch them carry what is not their own, when you observe how they respond to being overlooked or underappreciated,